Hi, everyone. Welcome to the March 18th edition of Horses to Watch. I'm David Aragona. This week on the episode, we're going to take a look back at 3 replays from last Saturday, 2 from Aqueduct in New York, 1 from Oaklawn Park in Arkansas. All of these races are taking place on the dirt. We'll begin with those 2 races from New York. They're actually the last 2 races on the card at Aqueduct last Saturday, race 8, the Correction, and race 9, a maiden race. We'll begin with that stakes race, the Correction, this one for the older fillies and mares going 6 furlongs on the dirt. And I want to focus on the number 2, Bridlewood Cat, who is probably the best horse in this race, just really lost all chance at the start. And we'll show the beginning of that race right here, both the head-on and the pan shot. You're going to see as they break from the gate, the Bridlewood Cat just stumbles really badly, a couple of strides out of the starting gate, goes down to her knees and gets bumped by a horse to her outside. We'll look at it again in the pan shot just to see how badly she's compromised by that, because as she's breaking this and stumbling, she actually gets shuffled back here, and she's actually going to wind up about last as they move about 16th of a mile into the race right here. And it's especially detrimental for a horse like Bridlewood Cat, because she was a horse who was actually predicted to be on the early lead in this race. She looked like the fastest horse on paper in prior starts where she had been successful. She had gone to the lead. So this is the kind of new situation that horses typically are not able to adjust to. When a front runner breaks slowly and has to adjust to run as a closer instead, typically that results in a pretty poor performance. But Bridlewood Cat, to her credit, is almost going to win this race despite that poor start. Now, they are moving at a pretty good clip up front, so that's going to help a closer like her. And the horse that's actually right behind her in the early going, that horse, the number 1, Slimy, is also involved in the finish. I believe she finishes second in this race. So Bridlewood Cat did have the pace in her favor in that regard, but I still think she runs a notable race to adjust her running style to something that was unfamiliar for her. And as they come to the top of the stretch here, you're going to see her rider, Junior Alvarado, wheels her to the far outside. She's losing ground here as her rival to the inside, Slimy, actually cuts the corner at the top of the stretch. Now, what happens here is that the entire field is going to basically come together like an accordion at the end. You've got 6 horses who are going to finish within about 2 lengths of each other at the wire here. And while Bridlewood Cat does only lose by about 3/4 of length at the finish, maybe even a half a length, she finishes 4th in this race, and you see there's a very small gap from 1st back to 6th. And the winner of this race, Piedi Bianchi, won Bayer. That is much lower than the kind of speed figure that you would expect a stakes race for older horses like this to receive. So there is that adage that there are no trips in slow races, and that might apply to Bridlewood Cat, because she did run far below her typical speed figures in the low 90s in this race. But given the trouble she had at the start and the fact that she still finished off the board in this race, she might be a horse that you do want to bet back next time, because she has shown the ability to run much faster in prior starts. So she's a horse that I would look for in stakes company again next time. As I said at the top, we'll take a look with the next race at Aqueduct on that Saturday card. It is race 9 for some maidens, and I want to focus on a first-time starting 3-year-old filly, the number 2, Ramon. And we're going to take a look at this race as they break from the gate from the head-on shot, and we're going to follow the head-on all the way down the backstretch and into the turn. And you're going to see that the number 2 here, Ramon, just takes a slight bump coming out of the starting gate, but no real trouble here. What does happen is that as horses start rail, and she's about right in behind the leader, she gets into a stalking position again. Junior Alvarado is the rider here. He's on her. She's going to start to get pretty rank under Junior, and he takes a pretty hard hold of her about a furlong into this race here, and she's starting to throw her head about. She's that horse with that white blaze. You see the chestnut in between horses, and I start to move into the turn. You see that her head is cocked towards the inside. Junior Alvarado has a really hard hold on that inside rein. He's trying to keep her from lugging out here because he has horses to the outside, and she just wants to go forward, wants to lug out. Just a first who seems really green at this point in the race, and once they get into the stretch, you're going to see that she continues to be really hard for him to handle. We're going to switch to the pan shot here shortly, and you'll see that he asks her a little bit, starts to nudge her here, asks her for a little bit of run around the quarter pole. He's even going to give her a tap of the whip at about the 3/16 pole, but once she just starts to lug in again, you see she's not responding to that kickback. She still has her head cocked to the outside. He's just going to ease up on her right here, and she's going to basically drop back in the pack, but she still does only finish 5th in this race. It's not like she completely falls apart, and it's worth noting the winner of this race wins pretty impressively, runs a pretty fast speed figure. Actually, the time of this race going 6 furlongs was almost exactly the same as the time of the Correction, the race we just watched. So that's pretty fast for a New York bred 3-year-old filly, even though the Correction was a slow race, as I mentioned. And Ramon just feels like a filly that wasn't mentally prepared for this debut start. She also may be a filly that does better with racing experience and possibly a surface switch, because her trainer, Tom Morley, is not one that typically has first-time starters ready to fire first time out. And she does have a pedigree that suggests turf might be her preferred surface, because she is sired by Breeders' Cup Turf Mile winner Cara Conti, and there is plenty of turf on the dam side for pedigree. So maybe if racing does continue next month and we do get some turf racing pretty soon at Aqueduct, she's one that I would look for in a turf race in the near future. Finally, move down to Arkansas for the Essex Stakes, which was run on that Rebel undercard at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. And I want to focus on the number 4 Bankit. This is a field of 7 runners, and Bankit was one of the closers in this race. We'll take a look at the field as they break from the gate, and it's no surprise that Bankit is going to be taken right to the back of the pack by his jockey, Ricardo Santana. Obviously, this is a muddy track, or sloppy track situation. The track took a lot of rain at Oaklawn Park on Saturday and even earlier on Friday. So it's a pretty wet track they're dealing with. That might not be Bankit's preferred surface. Just keep that in the back of your mind, since he does not do well on this race. But I think there are other reasons beyond the track surface why Bankit was unsuccessful here. If you compare this race, the Essex Stakes, to all of the other mile and the 16th races at Oaklawn Park on that Saturday card, this one featured one of the slowest paces, and they do really come home quite quickly in the stretch of this race, and that's always going to work against a horse like Bankit, who is a closer. Now, Ricardo Santana has done the right thing up until this point in time by keeping Bankit relatively close to the pace compared to where he usually is. He's only about 5th place here out of 7 horses on the backstretch, but as they move into the far turn here, the entire field is going to start to bunch up, and you see a rival is ranging up outside of Bankit, and what's going to happen is the number 4 Bankit is just going to slowly get shuffled out of position, and right about here, you're going to see that Ricardo Santana is going to have to steady ever so slightly as he has to tap on the brakes, because that horse is coming up outside. He's in tight quarters with those horses in front of him, not being able to really go anywhere at this point, and he's going to get shuffled back all the way to last now as they come to the top of the stretch. It still does appear that Bankit has some run underneath him, like he's going to be able to launch a stretch bid, but what happens is that nobody at Oaklawn was really able to close throughout the stretch of a lot of these races. Even though horses did come from the back of the pack, there just wasn't a whole lot of changing of positions in the stretch of many of these races at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. Some people thought that the track was speed favored. I have mixed feelings about it, but there's no questioning that horses couldn't close in this Essex because the pace had been so slow, and they're really finishing up quite quickly at the end here. The horses who were contesting the pace, the number 6 and the 7, they finished 2nd and 3rd here, whereas the horse who was right behind them was able to pass them in the lane. Nobody was able to launch a significant run from the back of the pack, including Bankit. So he was up against it from that standpoint. And also, I've just never thought that 2 turns is really Bankit's gig. I know that he's done well enough doing that in the past. I still think Bankit is more of a miler type. I think 1 mile, even as short as 7 furlongs, might be the best distance for him. And I'd love to see him get back to some 1-turn races. He is a New York bred after all, so Steve Asmussen does have the option to ship him back to New York or some of the 1-turn New York bred stakes races that they run both at Aqueduct and Belmont. So hopefully they do that with this horse pretty soon, because I don't think he's quite at that graded stakes level. So that's all the racing we'll take a look at for this week. I'll be back again next week to recap 3 more horses to watch.